Hello and happy Friday Between the Chapters book club members. I'm so excited to be back with another fun Q&A, live chat, live session. You guys know how much I love doing these, and I'm really excited that we get to do this on a Friday evening. What better way to kick off the weekend? As a bookworm, I don't think it's possible to have more fun than talking about books with a special guest. So I hope you guys are ready to get started with me. As always, if you leave a question for our special guest during this half-hour broadcast, you'll be automatically entered to win a surprise flash giveaway. I haven't decided what book I'm going to give away yet, so you can also drop some hints on what kind of book you want to win in the comments as you're asking your questions. I'd love some feedback and love some interesting genres to pick out and pull for you guys. But that's neither here nor there. Obviously, please leave some questions. Come chat with us. I'm so excited. I love hanging out with you guys in the comment section. So come chat with me. As I said, we do have a special guest this evening. So we are going to be talking with Erica Ruth. Oh, I just lost all ability to speak. We're going to be chatting with Erica Ruth Neubauer, author of Danger on the Atlantic. My cover is a little shiny, so it's a little hard to see right now. This is the third book in the Jane Wonderly mystery series. This series is so much fun, you guys. It really and truly makes you want to travel, makes you want to go back in time and history. I can't wait to talk about it. You guys know what a history nerd I am. And just to prove how much of a history nerd I am, I did have to wear my super cool William Shakespeare t-shirt with sunglasses because he's a hipster. So I had to have a little fun with this one. A little bit about our guest. Erica Ruth Neubauer spent years in the military, also as a Maryland police officer, and briefly as a high school English teacher before becoming a writer. So she has so much experience, so much background knowledge that she got to bring to her writing career. So we can definitely chat about that. I know you guys love that kind of information. A little bit about Danger on the Atlantic. This book does have one of my favorite tropes in all books, which is our intrepid investigative amateur sleuth goes undercover as the wife of her partner while on an Atlantic ship. You can clearly see how excited I am to talk about that. I love when people go undercover for these investigative stories. So happy that that's part of this one. This book is set in 1926. They're on a transatlantic liner. There are very unsavory characters, people who are maybe not telling the full truth, hiding lots of secrets, hiding lots of lies. There's historic fashion, historic everything. As a nerd, you guys know that I eat that stuff up. So we're definitely going to talk about the research part of this during our conversation. So I'm going to stop blabbing on because you're not here to talk to me. You're here to talk to our special guest. So I'm going to bring her on screen. Please help me welcome her. Leave us some comments down below and we will get started. Hi, Erica. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited.
I am so excited that you are able to join us on a Friday evening. So thank you for taking time to come hang out with our book club.
Of course. I love a book club.
I went on and on a little bit at the top about all of the cool things that are in this book, your background a little bit, but I would love for you to introduce readers to you and your series if they've never picked up your book before.
Absolutely. So this series starts with Murder at the Mina House, which is set in 1926 Egypt. Jane Wonderly is a war widow, a widow of the Great War, and she's not super sad about it. So it gives her kind of an interesting background as far as she's not interested in meeting men, even though her aunt is desperate to set her up and make sure she's remarried lest she become a spinster.
Right.
So that's the first book, is Egypt, and then the second book is set in England. It's a manor house mystery. And then this one on a transatlantic cruise.
I love that each book has its own super unique location, and you really get to dive into all these fascinating aspects of history for these different locations. I mean, life on a transatlantic liner is definitely different from a manor house and definitely different from being in Egypt. So I imagine that that was a lot of fun when you were crafting each book.
Absolutely. I mean, for sure, I have set myself up for a lot of work. I
Right.
have to basically start over every single book with my
Mhm.
location and my setting. But I kind of like that because I'm kind of a research nerd. I really like diving into learning new stuff. Plus, it gives me a great chance to travel to somewhere new. So
Well, that's perfect. I was really curious, and we've got a couple of readers already dropping questions. So thank you, readers. I'm going to come to them in just a minute. But you mentioned that you are a research fanatic. You love getting to have that aspect, and like you said, this is a perfect excuse to get to travel to some really fun locations. So,
yes.
is travel part of your research? What does research look like for you?
It is part of my research, although I don't do it first.
Oh,
So,
interesting.
yeah, so for both England, or I'm sorry, England, I did not do a research trip because my ex-husband is from England, and so I've been there many, many times. So I
Right.
had been there enough times that like I didn't need to go. But for both Egypt and for this transatlantic cruise, I had already written the book. Um,
Okay.
for Murder at the Mina House, it was almost finished, and then I went and took the tour. I stayed at the Mina House, um, and then went back and fixed things that I had gotten maybe not quite right. And same with the transatlantic cruise. I had a pretty long first draft, and while I was on the cruise, I was filling out details and description and like what it was like to actually be on a ship that big for
Hmm.
7 days crossing the Atlantic.
Right.
Because I, in my opinion, I do a lot of research up front, but then I have to write the book to figure out what I don't know.
Right. Now, I imagine that that would be the trickier part. And probably if it were me, and we readers know because I've talked about it with other authors, I would absolutely never get to the actual writing part of the book because I would just be researching everything. Have you
It's
ever fallen down like a research rabbit hole where it's not even something you needed for the book, but you just couldn't let it go?
Yeah, that does happen. Or where I find something super interesting and then I'm like, you cannot write about that just to write about it. You can't just like shoehorn it into the book just because you think it's interesting. It has to fit.
I
Um,
mean, I'm a fan of shoehorning in all interesting history, but I'm not your editor, so don't listen to me.
it's fair. That's very fair.
All right, so we do have a couple of reader questions already coming in. So, since we're already on the topic of how you go about crafting and writing your story, what time of sorry, let me rewind a little bit in my brain. Do you like to write in the mornings or at night, or do you have a specific time that you like to sit down and write?
I so what's interesting is that I write in the mornings, even though I am not a morning person. One of the
No.
reasons Jane drinks so much coffee is because I drink so much coffee to get going. But it is the first thing I do when I'm working is or writing a book is like I have my breakfast and then I sit down with my computer and I start working. I find it's when my brain is freshest, and then that way I can knock off in the afternoon and kind of let my brain sort of unwind
Right.
and
Take a rest.
rest up and then start back up for the next day.
Oh, that's really interesting. I am also not a morning person, so the idea of trying to get my brain to operate at that time of day, hopefully my bosses aren't listening. I totally work very hard first thing in the morning, guys.
Yes.
Um, but I love that you were able to infuse a little bit of yourself with your coffee needs and like not being a morning person into this story. That's always really fun.
So much coffee.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
Um, one reader is curious, when you're writing, do you like to have music or sound going on around you in the background, or do you need total quiet?
So I actually like to write in coffee shops.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, so I have a couple of favorite coffee shops in the neighborhood that I like to walk to. And I definitely have earbuds in.
Mhm.
Um, and I find that I can write with music, but it has to be music without words to it. Or
Right.
sometimes I can write when I'm listening to like 1920s music, which is fun.
I was going to say, do
Very
you listen
appropriate.
to music for the setting that you are writing?
Sometimes, yeah. Otherwise,
Okay.
sometimes I just listen to like Apple Music has like a jazz mix that doesn't have words to it, and I can just put that on as background noise. But yeah,
I love that. So I was trying not to laugh while you were talking. I'm going to read this question verbatim because I just appreciate very much how they wrote it.
all right.
Do you have any writing quirks, such as drinking out of a certain mug, only eating red M&Ms, or typing with your tongue sticking out? I love that. That's very descriptive.
This is very descriptive. I hope I don't type with my tongue sticking out because I do it in public.
I was going to say, since you're at a
So-
coffee shop, hopefully not that last one.
Hopefully not, although I don't know. I think I do talk to myself while I write.
Okay.
So hopefully they're like, can see
Hopefully
that,
everyone else also has in earbuds.
right? Yeah, and they're like, she's fine. She's
Right.
She's nothing to be worried about.
I'm sorry, I was going to talk over you. Go ahead.
That's fine. I don't have any other writing quirks. I don't think.
All right.
I don't have a special mug.
I mean, maybe that's what's missing. Maybe you need to go find it, or just start typing with your tongue sticking out. Maybe that is the formula.
Maybe that's the thing I'm missing.
Yeah, let's keep that in mind.
Yeah.
But you did mention that you do sometimes talk to yourself, so that does make me curious. Do you ever talk to your characters? Like, does Jane ever have a conversation with you, or do you ever try to talk to her?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Sometimes when I think sometimes I'm working out dialogue, especially when I'm talking to myself.
Mm.
I also do it when I walk, because in the afternoons I like to go for a 2 or 3 mile walk. Man, I also talk to myself during those. So I think people in my neighborhood are all probably getting a really good show. And yeah, I'm probably talking to I'm usually talking to my characters and like working out like how they would be talking to each other.
I mean, I think that makes perfect sense. That's how you're going to figure out whether or not it sounds natural.
Exactly.
Yeah, all right. I love it. All right. So our next reader question, let's see. I'm trying to skim through. We've got quite a few good ones. So thank you guys. Keep them coming.
Nice.
Do you like to read historical cozy mysteries as well as write them? Or do you try to steer away from the genre so that they don't influence you?
No, I still love to. I know a lot of people do. Some people don't read fiction at all when they're writing, and I do not find that to be the case. Like, I still love to read historical mysteries. I don't find that they interfere with my writing. And they're one of my favorite genres to read. Actually, is historical mysteries. So I still do read a ton of them.
Awesome, I love that. Sorry, I'm trying to read and talk and listen all at the same time. I got to learn to multitask a little better over here. So we did talk, I mentioned very briefly at the beginning, a little bit of your background.
Yeah.
You have a very extensive background in all different fields, like very hands-on stuff that I would imagine contributes to your writing. And we do have a reader who's curious about how long have you been writing? And I'm going to tack on a second part of that question. How long did it take you to become a writer?
So, how long have I been writing? So, Murder at the Mina House was the first book I ever tried to write. And before that, I think I maybe had a short story. I might have had some stuff as a kid. I always wanted to be a writer. I just never. And I remember even in my 20s, like having some notebooks where I would like write down ideas for a character that I could maybe do, but I never sat down and tried it until Murder at the Mina House, which is my first book, and it's the first time I sat down and wrote. I do have a degree in English, but even for getting that degree, it was all like, comparative literature kind of stuff. So, and critical, nothing creative writing wise. So. What was the second part of the question?
I was just wondering how long. Now I forgot the second part of the question. It's going to come back to me at the end of the chat. We'll circle back around. It'll come back into my head in a minute. Readers, if you remember what I asked, put it in the comments for me. It's Friday, guys. My brain has turned off. I'm telling you. I am curious. And I saw the question and then it ran away, and that's why I'm not putting questions on the screen, because they're all vanishing on me too quickly. All right, so one reader is curious, did you always know you wanted to write, or was there a specific moment that made you go, this is what I want to do?
A little bit of both. So I always wanted to be a writer. I've always been a huge book nerd. I remember when my mom put my first Nancy Drew book into my hands, and started the whole thing with Me and Mysteries. We're reading them. My dad raised me on old black and white movies and old Agatha Christie and Masterpiece Mystery. So that was all also a really big inspiration for me. But I remember specifically where I was when I figured out what I wanted to read or write myself. My best friend is a librarian, and so we were sitting on my back porch one summer, and she was reading something, and I was reading Ashley Weaver's Murder at the Brightwell. And I kept putting it down, and it's set in 1930s England. And I kept putting it down and saying, I want to write something like this. But I want to set it in 1920s Egypt. And like right there, she and I started like passing ideas back and forth about like what the characters would be like and what could possibly happen. At one point we were laughing so hard that my neighbors slammed their windows shut.
Oh no.
I know. Sorry. So yeah, that's exactly where I was when the whole idea for Jane Wonderly and Murder at the Mina House was born.
I love that. And I'm so glad you mentioned a specific book that really triggered it for you, because that is usually one of my questions for authors, because I've found, I've worked with authors for quite a while now, and I've found that almost every author has one book that they'll never forget.
Yep.
Because it just clicked in their brain. So I'm so excited that you actually mentioned it. You remember it.
Right.
It's always fun. I'm always curious what that moment is. One reader is curious, do you have a writer crush or someone who you absolutely fangirl over? It is the writer that you will immediately get their book when it goes on sale.
Oh my God, I have a couple, you guys. Lori King is one of them. Her series I really love. Lindsay Fay is another one that I just really love her writing, and buy them immediately. There are a couple other ones. I'm obsessed with Diane Freeman's series.
Yes.
I love that series. So I immediately pick those up. Mm-hmm. And then I'm still a fan of Ashley Weaver's. She has 2 series now. I'm still a fan of both of those. That whole thing came full circle too, because we share an agent now, which is amazing.
Look how perfect that is.
I know. I'm honestly looking at my bookshelves like, who are my auto buys? I think that might be them.
I mean, that's a pretty good list already. So I love that. I can never answer that question, so I'm glad. It's always fun when someone's like, okay, here's 4, but I feel like I have more. Like 4 would already, like, my list goes forever. So I can't pick favorites.
No, it's really hard. We're picking favorite children.
Yes, exactly. You can't. It's just impossible. This one is also going to be an impossible question. We've got 2 back-to-back impossible questions.
I'm ready.
In fairness, this comes from readers, so I'm not the one torturing you here.
Okay.
If you could sit down to have lunch with any author, past or present, who would it be?
You guys!
I know.
I honestly think it would be either Agatha Christie.
Absolutely.
I think she was probably fascinating. Mm-hmm. Or someone like Jane Austen, who I think was probably a pretty good time.
I also think that. I love that you've got a mystery writer and then a romance writer in the mix there.
Yeah, I do like a little romance, you guys. I like a little romance.
Everyone here knows that I absolutely love romance in my books, so that's no problem with me. But I do agree. I think both of those would be like a real fun time. I feel like Agatha Christie would be a hoot at a table.
Yeah.
Probably get up to some trouble,
Yeah.
I think. All right. So for the second,
Okay.
I can't answer this one. And this is one that comes up at lives quite often. If you were sent into the future and could only take 3 books with you, what books will you bring? And you cannot say your Kindle.
3
books. 3 books.
Okay, I'm gonna take Pride and Prejudice. I read it every year. And I'm gonna take this is such a hard question.
It's a very hard question.
I think I'm gonna take the book. I think I'll take The Beekeeper's Apprentice because it's one of my favorite books. You know what else? I'm gonna take the book Jane Steele by Lindsay Fay.
Nice. Love it. You were able to come up with them.
I know. That was really hard though.
It's very hard. I'm going to ask, and this is also a hard question because it's like picking a favorite child, but hopefully a little less hard than the 3-book question. In your series, if you could spend 24 hours with one character, either in our time or their time, who would you want to spend the day with?
I honestly would love to spend the day with Jane in the 1920s. Yeah. I really like my character, and I would love to hang out with her and have a couple of cocktails because I think we would get up to some trouble.
Yes, I agree. I usually am always a person I want to hang with the side characters, but in this series, Jane all the way. She is so much fun.
Thanks.
So love that. As a little addendum, would you want to go to 1926 with her, or would you want to show her today's world?
I would love to go to 1926. I was so disappointed that I couldn't actually transcend space and time. It's when I visited Egypt and stayed at the Mina House. I was so disappointed that I couldn't actually step back into 1926 to see how it looked and what it had been like. Yeah.
Well, I love that. I'm going to try to squeeze in a couple more reader questions before we ask my final question of the chat. We've got a few minutes left. Okay. One reader is curious, how do you name your characters? Do you have a special trick for it?
It's getting trickier.
I bet.
The more books you write, the trickier it gets. So Jane was pretty easy because I love the name Jane. And her last name came from the movie The Maltese Falcon, which is one of my favorite old movies. And Redvers came from, I was just going through a list of British names, British baby names from the late 1800s, right? I got pretty far down on that list. Redvers. And I was like, oh, I like this.
As I say, I love that name.
It feels good.
Yes.
And so I've kind of done that with a lot of the other ones too, where I just kind of keep looking through lists of names until I find something that feels right for the character. And then in addition to that, I've started stealing my friends' names. Like, I'm stealing your name, but you're not I'm sorry that you're dead, or I'm sorry that you're not actually like this person, but I needed a name.
I'm so glad you tacked that on at the end, because I was going to ask, we had a chat yesterday and a reader asked this question, and I'm putting it in every mystery chat we have going forward. Have you ever named a dead body or villainous character after someone who has wronged you or that you don't like?
Yes, I have.
I love it.
I had Anna Stainton is based on an old boss that I had in the military that I did not care for very much.
Okay.
And now she's in the book, no longer with us.
Now she has met her fate.
Yes. So
I love it, and I love that you're honest about it.
And fair warning.
Yeah, so don't get on your bad side.
Exactly.
Perfect. This is a pretty tricky question, actually. One reader is curious, because you do have a series going. Which one is your favorite that you have written?
That's a good question too. I I think I'm gonna have to go with Murder at the Mina House. I'm very sorry to
Mhm.
report because it was Egypt, and I had been obsessed with Egypt since I was a little girl. Like it was such a huge bucket list trip for me to be able to go to Egypt. Yeah, but I also didn't think I could do like something like Elizabeth Peters had done with like the Amelia Peabody series and like keep
Mhm.
them all in Egypt, which is and because I like to travel,
Right.
so which is why they keep moving. The one I'm writing right now is set in Istanbul.
Mhm.
So that's a really fun city to visit.
Yeah.
um, so, but I think Egypt, that was really a special trip for me.
I have to say I've had a lifelong obsession with Egypt, and so I definitely, as much as like I am a sucker for a transatlantic liner mystery story, I'm also like, oh, but Egypt, like
Egypt.
it's just so cool.
I know.
So I do love that. And I love that Jane is so well traveled. Like I could only wish for that life.
Right?
um, so one more well, two more questions for me before we end. But first, one of the easier questions.
All right.
For Danger on the Atlantic, was there a piece of like research or a piece of history that you uncovered that was just totally fascinating to you that you didn't know beforehand and you had to put it in the book, or one that you couldn't put in the book and you really wanted to?
I did, and it's that there was a Turkish bath on that boat. I couldn't
Really?
believe it. Yeah, so there was a full Turkish bath on that boat, and I was like, "What?" So that's why someone gets killed in it because I needed a reason for them to go in there because I was
Right.
like, I can't believe I couldn't believe like just some of the extravagant
Mm-hmm.
rooms and like the way they were decorated. I was lucky that doing research for this book, I was able to find a lot of photographs of the Olympic,
Mm-hmm.
the real ship. So I was able to find a lot of photographs of what it looked like in the 20s, and a lot of good description. But yeah, full Turkish bath.
That's amazing and also seems so extravagant.
Yeah, it really does.
I love that. And I love that you were able to put it in the book.
Yeah, I like that I got to work that in.
Yeah, like nothing makes me sadder when talking with our historical authors. You're like, I found this amazing thing and it doesn't fit.
Yeah.
It breaks my little history nerd heart just a little bit. All right, so I've got one more question. This is a little bit of a tough one, but I think you'll do great with it. I love to ask all of our visiting authors this question. We have quite a few, aspiring and wanting to be writers in our book club. So I love giving this, moment for them as
Yeah.
well. Now that you have a few books under your belt, what is one thing you would say to your early writing self, the you before you had your first book published? What's one thing you would want to tell her now that you're this far into your career? And it could be book related or it could be just life related.
I actually have a couple of things
Mhm.
that I can share. I was lucky enough that I was in the mystery community for a couple of years as a reviewer before I started to write. So I was given some really great advice. The first piece was to write what you want to read.
Mm,
Because you're going to spend a lot of time in this world. Like you're going to spend at least a year in each book.
mhm.
So make it something that you want to spend that much time with. You want to build a world that you want to be in
Right.
is what I did. So I'm happy to spend time with my characters. And the other is to get out of your own way. A first draft is supposed to be bad.
Right.
It's supposed to be hot garbage. And
Mhm.
so when that little voice in your head, and I still hear it, it's like, this is terrible.
Mhm.
No one's going to want to read this. Who cares? You just keep writing, get something down on the page, because then you have something to come back to and fix.
Right.
You just have to get that first draft out so that you have the bones of something to work with.
I love that. Both of those are great pieces of advice. I definitely struggle with that second one quite a bit. Anyone who works with me knows, like, this is a draft, but I have to make it perfect. No,
Nope.
you
Nope.
don't.
It's a first draft.
Yeah. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Um, And thank you so much for joining our group for this half hour and letting us chat about Jane and her adventures and the world you've created.
Thank you for having me. It was super fun.
We are at the end, but I do have to do a very quick 30-second shout out. I wore my fun William Shakespeare top.
She did.
Erica also wore a fun top, totally unplanned. We've got Edgar Allan Poe in the house. So just a couple of book nerds over here. So I just had to give that as a shout out to the end because readers, truly, we are just as nerdy as the rest of you. So that's why these are so much fun. So thank you so much for joining us this evening. This was a great chat. And readers, I hope you had a great time too. So thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.